took the time to join us this evening. I will dive into the next slide, and we'd love to hear from you. So you can navigate down to the chat. We'd love to hear your name and organization, and then also type in what you are hoping to learn about today. Give you a minute or two to open up the chat. Looks like, I don't know if I'm seeing anything in the chat. Maybe, is there, wondering if maybe something. Oh, perfect. Hi, Leah. Hi, Jen. Welcome. If you're just joining, go ahead and put your name and organization into the chat and what you're hoping to learn about today. Okay, well, still feel free to put that information into the chat. Hi, Linda. And we'll move on to the next slide. And we'll introduce ourselves. There's a few of us here that are going to be presenting today. My name is Maddie Falens, or Madison Falens. I am a nutrition education consultant, and I work for the Child and Adult Care Food Program branch at the California Department of Social Services. And I'll pass it off to my colleague, Julie.
Thanks, Maddie. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you all. My name is Julie Chesson. I work with Maddie at the Department of Social Services in the Child and Adult Care Food Program branch. I am also a nutrition education consultant. And today I'm kind of behind the scenes working on the technology piece of this presentation today. So you won't hear as much from me, but I am here with all of you. And I will go ahead and pass it off to Sophia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia Reamer-Bope. I am a regional farm to school network lead for the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And yeah, it's good to see everyone tonight.
Good evening. I'm Monet Parham Lee with the California Department of Public Health. I work in the Nutrition and Physical Activity branch and happy to be here. And I'll pass it off to our special guest speaker for tonight, Ms. Rachel Byman.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Byman and I'm a family childcare provider in Contra Costa County, and I'm gonna pass it back to Maddie.
Okay, thank you all for your introduction. Today, go ahead and I'm going to pass it off to Monet.
Thanks, Maddie. During our time together this evening, we'll hear updates from each of the state agency staff that you just heard from briefly. We'll also have an overview of Farm to ECE, along with a discussion of various Farm to ECE strategies with a focus on the education components of Farm to ECE. And then we'll conclude with some sharing of some resources. Hopefully you'll find something among those that you can use in your local work or in your technical assistance to folks who are doing this work on the ground. And we'll also conclude following the sharing of resources with a closing reflection to hopefully get the ideas generating around how you can use what you've heard tonight or share it with someone else who might benefit from it. So next slide. Kicking off the state updates, that'll be me. Within the California Department of Public Health, we implement the SNAP Ed program through local health departments in all California counties. And this takes place primarily in the form of technical assistance, training, and the provision of resources like some of those that we're going to share this evening. Many of these local health departments work with partners in ECE and or are implementing farm to school, farm to ECE activities locally. We additionally implement a Centers for Disease Control and Prevention grant known as the State Physical Activity and Nutrition Program. And within that program, Farm to ECE again is amongst those priorities for the program. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Sophia from CDFA.
Hi, so yeah, I'm with CDFA. Within CDFA, we house our state's Farm to School program, which also includes Farm to ECE. We have a few different state level supports available, including a quarterly community practice call for Farm to School. It's actually happening tomorrow, where we'll have a Farm to ECE breakout. So if you want to really double down on your community practices, you can register for that. I'll share our website in a minute where you can sign up. We also have a monthly e-newsletter where we send out resources, stories, opportunities, and other kind of goings on in the state and farm to school. We also have our Instagram, and then we hold a conference every other year. This slide's a little bit old, so it has the dates from 2023. Should probably update that, but we will be hopefully hosting a conference this year in 2025 in the fall. So you can look out for that in our newsletter. Next slide, please. We also have regional supports for your farm to ECE work. So each of the 8 regions in this map has a network lead and a producer engagement specialist that are there on the ground to help support your work. So we do things like have conversations to learn about your goals and what you're currently doing and see how we can help by connecting you to appropriate partners and resources, funding opportunities, brainstorming ideas. We also can connect you to farmers that make sense for where you are and what your needs are, and help you with the buying process, as we know that local purchasing can look a little bit different than what you're used to. Next slide. And thanks, Jen. She's one of my colleagues and shared the community practice call registration in the chat. And then finally, we have our Farm to School Incubator Grant Program. This grant program has 4 different tracks for different stakeholders within the farm to school world. Track 3 is our Farm to ECE grant. This grant, it's just starting up. So the 2023 cycle, we've already awarded grantees and they're starting their projects in the new year. And the purpose of this grant is for beginning or expanding farm to ECE efforts for both procurement of California grown foods and to engage young children in hands-on food education opportunities. This last cycle, the awards were between $50,000 and $200,000. And we had a lot of interest. We had 100 applicants with $6.7 million requested, and we were able to award 17 projects with 3.23 million awarded for track 3. So if you're here tonight and you got one of our grants, congratulations. If you applied, feel free to reach out to us. We're still, excited to talk to you and see how we can help out. And this is a annual grant that has to be refunded every year. So hopefully we'll be able to offer it again in 2025. But again, we'll just see kind of where the budget lands. Okay, next slide, please. All right.
The California Department of Social Services updates. We have almost finalized our California Farm to CACFP strategic plan. We hope to have that finalized very soon, and we'll make it available on our Farm to CACFP webpage. We also are still actively involved in the FarmWise Learning Collaborative. It stands for WIN for farmers, students, and educators. And CDSS received this learning collaborative opportunity, which is driving a lot of our Farm to CACFP efforts, including we are building a California Farm to CACFP coalition, which comprised of members from all different state departments, nonprofits, family child care homes, lots of partners and stakeholders in Farm to CACFP. And the next slide, we are actively opening up the first California Farm to CACFP census. So if you are a CACFP operator, we'd love to hear from you. The census opens up on March 3rd, and it will be closing March 21st. So the purpose of the census is to collect baseline data from CACFP agencies to identify barriers and benefits to the Farm to CACFP work they're currently doing or maybe want to do. We're looking for curriculum, resources, and training needs. And we are releasing the first census specifically for childcare centers, family childcare homes, at-risk after-school programs, emergency shelters, and adult daycare centers. And so we plan to release the family childcare home provider survey in the next few months. So feel free we'll release more information about that in the near future. And you can find all this information on the CDSS Farm to CACFP webpage. And on the next slide, we have a tip sheet that we created that goes over the census. And so this will be available on our Farm to CACFP webpage. You can use the QR code on the screen. We'll also be providing it later in the presentation as well. And I just wanted to briefly mention before I pass it off to Monet to go into the details of Farm to ECE, we have many different terms that we throw around with Farm to institution. So we refer oftentimes, we often say Farm to CACFP and Farm to ECE. And although they're very similar, the differences are Farm to CACFP includes all the CACFP program types. So that's childcare centers, family childcare homes, at-risk after-school programs, emergency shelters, and adult daycare centers. Versus Farm to ECE focuses primarily on children ages 0 to 5 in early care and education settings. And so that can be childcare centers, family childcare homes, Head Start, early Head Start sites. So for this specific webinar, we're really gearing it towards the Farm to ECE centers and home sites. And I'll pass it off to Monet to go into greater depth. Oh, Monet, you're muted.
Well, after all of these years, I still do that every once in a while. Thank you, Maddie. The three core elements that come together to form Farm to ECE are the purchase, promotion, and serving of local foods, engagement of children in hands-on learning through gardening, and educational activities for children related to ag, food, health, and also to nutrition. Before I move on to the next slide, though, I really want to emphasize the value of pulling together a team when implementing Farm to ECE. You might look at this set of activities and think, oh gosh, there's a lot going on there, or there are things there that I'm not familiar with, but that's where a team can really make a difference. This can ensure that whatever you do in one of the three areas or in all of the three areas, that there's some support The team might include staff, parents, extended family members, neighbors, or others. And I also want to emphasize that the activities don't have to be overwhelming. For example, you can start with growing peas or herbs in a pot, or by teaching children about healthy food during tastings from a local farmer's market. And as mentioned earlier, we'll focus on the education component of Farm to ECE today, and future community of practice events will address procurement and edible gardens. Next slide, please. Thank you. Farm to ECE has a variety of benefits for families, for ECE professionals, for the farm to ECE systems, as well as for the farmers themselves. We have a nice diagram here that I think does a great job of giving some ideas of the benefits in each of the areas. For example, Farm to ECE helps children develop lifelong healthy eating habits by exposing them to a variety of healthy foods early and often. Also helps provide improved and equitable access to healthy and local food, provides ECE professionals with an awareness of the importance of local food purchasing and with opportunities to engage in local food purchasing. And then finally, Farm to ECE extends increased community support for and business to our local farmers. And on the next slide, Sophia will help us continue to delve into the education element of Farm to ECE.
Thanks, Monet. Yeah, so as she mentioned, we're going to be focusing in on nutrition and agriculture-based education today with our amazing guest speaker, Rachel, talking more about her program and how she utilizes this in her work. Wanted to give kind of a kind of broad idea of what this can look like. It's going to look different in every single site because it's just a broad term that can mean a lot of different things to different people, and really just depends on kind of where you are in your work, and where your interest is and where your community's interest is. And also, we have these little carrots next to our examples here, and that's because we really like to emphasize in this work to start small and grow sustainably over time, just for the sake of you and your staff. And we really want you to find something that works for you, that's easy to implement, that makes an impact, and slowly grow that program to be more comprehensive as you and your site become more comfortable. So one carrot means it's easy to implement, something you can just do as a fun activity with your kids one day. And up to 3 carrots, which is more comprehensive, but can also be more impactful. So our first example here is a fruit and vegetable lesson. That can mean, going to your local farmer's market and picking up, a seasonal fruit or vegetable, or a CSA box that's delivered, or maybe doing a harvest of the month. And bringing it back, and maybe the kids try a little bit. They kind of, maybe they'll describe, what does it feel like? Is it crunchy? Is it soft? Do they like it? Do they not? And then, you can read a book about food and gardening or something of that nature, like in the picture. Another example is integrating it into your subjects that you're already doing with your kids. This is a great way to implement Farm to ECE education because you're not adding on, you're just kind of integrating it into what you're already doing. And because nutrition and agriculture-based education is so broad and kind of affects so many different aspects of our lives, it can be easily integrated into really any subjects, as Rachel will talk about in a minute. And then going to a field trip to a farm or a community garden is a great way to get kids, experiential education, to help them really understand where their food comes from and who's in their community, and have a good time. If you can't get a field trip going, you can do farm visits, like farmer visits to the classroom. Sometimes they'll do that. It's really fun for the kids. And then finally, comprehensive evidence-based curriculum integration. There's some amazing curricula that are out there that have been vetted, that you can use, and we'll talk about one later in our resource section. So yeah, I'll pass it off to Rachel now.
Good evening, everyone. So, this is my program, and my husband and I have been running it for the past 15 years. And we love to include farm to ECE because it's a way for the kids to get good nutrition and a way for them to learn about new things. So, in this one, we're talking about how we use what the kids are doing in the DRDP and how it meets the needs of the DRDP. So for this one, we did literacy and math. And so it has the interest in literacy and number sense. And so we're using this book called Edible Numbers, and we just put it in our dramatic play area, which has the kitchen. And so the kids are able to take the book and take a look at it and see the different fruits and vegetables that are in it. We use it to talk about the different fruits and vegetables. As you can see, there's purple cauliflower, there's regular cauliflower, there's pears on there, there's apples and plums, and I believe the last one is a fig. But as you can see in the picture next to the edible numbers, the book has in it, it has numbers in there. So the kids are learning one-to-one correspondence because we can count the different amounts of vegetables that they are seeing in there. And you can see in the picture, the two pictures, they're sharing the book and they're reading it to each other. So this was a great way for them to also have that social emotional relationship too, because they're sharing it with their friends. Next slide, please. So in this one, we have a garden in our backyard, and so we were growing some different fruits and vegetables. And the picture on the far left, you can see the child right there. It's a video of him digging for the potatoes that we grew. And then the picture next to it, you can see the potatoes that he was able to find. And then we added some potatoes in the last picture from the local farmers market, and we had the kids peel them and we had them cut them up, and we made French fries with them for lunch. This showed the children the science of physical development. They were able to see the cause and effect by they grew them from seeds, and they were able to see all of the roots come out and see it, and then they were able to pick them out of the garden. And the number sense was we counted how many potatoes that we found inside of the bucket. And then they had their sense of the natural world because we were growing the vegetables, and it had the nutrition because we grew vegetables. They used their fine motor skills by being able to peel the potatoes and cut them up. We have special tools for the kids to use so that they're able to do it on their own. Next slide, please. In this one, we're talking about the physical development and math and science. And so right now it's gourd season. So we went out and bought a lot of different gourds. We bought different sizes and shapes and colors so that the kids were able to use them in different ways. You look at the picture on the far right, we have some really huge pumpkins. This one is good for their physical development because they're heavy, and you see the two girls, they're sharing the weight. They're learning how to share it because it's too heavy for just one of them. And so they're learning about the cause and effect, that it's heavy or light. And the other little girl has some smaller ones. We use it for them to count with. If you look at the picture on the left, the little boy is counting as he is placing the different pumpkins into his dump truck. And so he's counting them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We also have them sort them out by colors and shapes and sizes and things like that. This allows for them to also have relationships and social interactions with their peers because they're talking to each other, they're picking them up with each other, they're playing games with them. And so it really is a fun experience for them. They love to sit on them, they love to roll them. So they're using their gross motor skills. They're doing all kinds of things with the pumpkins. Next slide, please. In this one, we're talking about history and social science and language and literacy development. So we have this book called Sophie's Squash, and in the book, Sophie has a squash and she becomes friends with the squash. The squash is her baby. She holds on to it until the squash becomes all moldy and gross, and then she has to plant her squash. So we talked about this book when a couple of months ago when we first started planting some of the seeds for our squash. And then we talked about it again when we were harvesting our squash. So the kids have some of the squash that we harvested and then also some other local squash because I wanted them to have different types of squash. So some of them have butternut squash, we have acorn squash, we have spaghetti squash, we have honeydew squash. So there was a litany of different ones. And in that, we were able to talk about how we grew them, how they got bigger and bigger. They started off really small and then they got bigger and bigger. We were able to talk about the different sizes and the textures of them. And then we also had an activity where we had cut them open and they got to see the different seeds and we were able to compare and contrast the different seeds in them. This was really great because it the story went along with what we were doing and we actually had the squash that Sophie was using, which was a butternut squash. And so it made the story come to life for them. And the kids loved being able to touch and feel them and talk about the size of them, which ones were heavier, which ones were lighter, the colors, because the acorn squashes are green, the spaghetti squash are yellow, butternut squash are orange. So we were able to talk about colors, shapes, sizes, and all different things. Next slide, please. And this one, we are making a snack and we're using some of the local produce. So the kids are cutting up blood oranges, which are a little bit different from the regular oranges. In my program, I try to get the kids something that is unique and different that they might not have tried before so they can taste test it. We've done dragon fruit, we've done kiwi, we've done jackfruits. This time we were doing the blood oranges. So they were surprised. So I just take the oranges, and I ask them, what do they think the color is going to be inside? Since they've never seen a blood orange, they all thought it was going to be orange. And then when it was red, they were very surprised. And then they were able to use their fine motor skills because we had the tools for them to cut the oranges. So they cut them up for snack. And then you can see we were also cutting up some strawberries. And we were doing this for a Valentine's snack where you take the yogurt and we put them in the middle picture. We have them in molds of like hearts and squares and stars. And then in the last picture, we took a cookie sheet and we filled it up with yogurt. And we just have the kids put the yogurt and the strawberries on there and then you freeze them. And then in the silicone molds, you can pop them out. But in the big cookie tray one, you can take it and crumble it. And it's kind of like yogurt bark. And it's like ice cream, kind of like frozen yogurt. And so they really love it and enjoy it. And it's using fresh ingredients and fresh stuff that is local and in season. So they learn how to do the measurement because we had to measure them to put it inside of the silicone molds. They learned the cause and effect because we put them in the freezer so they knew it was wet before, like regular yogurt. And then when you put it in the freezer, it was frozen. So that showed them the differences. And then they were able to use their fine motor skills and they had to work together and take turns in doing the cutting and the preparing of the snack. Next slide.
Okay, so we're going to dive into an activity. And I think because we have okay, so we're going to have everyone go into breakout groups. So in your breakout group, you're going to share an activity idea for each of the following or any of the following ECE focus areas. And whatever, anything that Rachel had mentioned. So math, science, art, literacy, social emotional learning. If you're not a child care center, you know, this is an opportunity maybe from you to learn from another person in your group. So you'll have 6 minutes, and once once you come back to the main room, you'll choose one person to share. We'll have a whiteboard ready for you when you get back. And for some reason, if yeah, so we'll put you into breakout groups, and then we'll have one person just jot down some ideas, and you'll share it with the larger group. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had some interesting conversations in your groups. Thanks for participating. So now we'd love to hear from all of you. So we have a whiteboard up on your screen. You should be able to see it on your screen. If for some reason you're coming up with an error or having technical difficulties, feel free to just put your comments in the chat. But we'd love to hear what ideas that you came up with in your group. So feel free to write on the whiteboard. You have different options. You can use a pen, or if you select the T on the left-hand side of your screen, it's on the left-hand side for my screen, it's for text, so you can click on the whiteboard and type in your response there. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that.
And if anyone happens to have a connection error and they're not able to use the whiteboard, you can always add some ideas to the chat as well.
Starting to see some ideas, creating a worm farm and practicing and experimenting with composting. Very cool. I've heard a few people doing that. Math garden beds, using inedible parts of plants to create artwork to reduce waste. Love that. We actually did an activity similar to that with Rachel at a conference last year, where she used herbs from her garden and had the kids write or smear the herbs onto a blank piece of paper, and the kids were able to draw with it. They could smell the herbs. I thought that was a really cool activity that she had the kids do. We have chickens, rabbits, ducks, quail. Wow. So the children get to get the experience of interacting with animals as well as having fresh eggs. That's amazing. Still typing. And we also harvest the animals for fresh meat. Wow. Full circle. I love it. All right. Well, thank you all for participating. Great to have different ideas. Oh, Tanika, we discussed planning earlier to get a good harvest, growing food and fresh flowers. This helps with clean air and learning colors. Yes, love that. Okay, group 4, I use the Junior Master Gardens curriculum. There's a physical activity section called Garden Yoga. Students start to use a seed, child pose, tree pose, etc. Students count to 5, learning their numbers while getting their physical activity. I love that. Very cool. All right, thank you all for participating. And so now while we get our, we'll bring our PowerPoint back up, and we'll dive into resources. And so on the next slide so we hosted a few other Farm to ECE Community of Practice webinars last year, and we have a webinar, we have recordings available on the CDFA YouTube channel. So you can access the YouTube channel by scanning the QR code on your screen, or we'll also drop the links to each video in the chat. And so we have different guest speakers on each webinar. We have different topics that we discuss. This year, we decided to have a theme of each farm to ECE or farm to CACFP element. So this webinar highlights nutrition, education, and garden education. And then we'll have guest speakers talk about gardening and then also procuring local foods. So stay tuned. And on the next slide, we would love to hear, we'd love to have you come back for a future webinar. So we'd love to hear what you, when you are able to attend, what your preference is. So we'd like to know your preferred length of a future meeting or webinar, whether you'd like an hour or an hour and a half, and then your preferred start time for a future webinar. So we're looking at 11 o'clock, 12, or 1 o'clock. I'll give you a minute or two to select your answers. And we'll close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you all for sharing. Looks like a majority of people would like an hour, and it's kind of split between 11, 12, and 1, but it looks like 11 is the winner. So thank you. That's really helpful for us when we plan our future webinars. Monique, as someone who doesn't have set nap times, evenings are always best here. Okay, well, good to know, Monique. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. So the Farm to CACFP webpage has a ton of great resources. I mentioned it a few slides ago as well. We'll drop the link to the page in the chat. You can also access it on by scanning the QR code on your screen. And on the next slide, we also have Farm to CACFP tip sheet. So we created a tip sheet for each CACFP program type. So there's childcare centers and family childcare homes. There's one for at-risk after-school programs, emergency shelters, and adult daycare centers. So feel free to check out those tip sheets that are available on our Farm to CACFP webpage. Next slide, please. And so there's an amazing curriculum available at the California Foundation for Agriculture in the Classroom. If you're not familiar with this curriculum, I highly suggest you check it out. We'll drop the link to the curricula in the chat, and you can also scan the QR code here to access it directly on your phone. Next slide, thank you. And I'll pass it off to Monet.
All right, thank you, Maddie. Quickly, there are a couple of versions of Grow It, Try It, Like It out there. If you haven't utilized these, we highly recommend them. Grow It, Try It, Like It, Fun with Fruits and Vegetables at Family Childcare is designed to help provide garden-based nutrition education for children 3 to 5 years old in family childcare settings, while the Grow It, Try It, Like It nutrition education kit featuring My Plate is for centers, and it focuses on garden-themed nutrition education and introduces children to 3 fruits and 3 veggies. Both versions of this resource offer children a chance to learn about food, experience fruits and vegetables, and provide ECE professionals like many of you with tools to help support the children through the lessons. Next slide. Thank you. This next resource is sort of, I don't want to, an encyclopedia maybe is the best maybe description of it. And consultants at the Association of State Public Health Nutritionists selected a variety of resources focused on Farm to ECE based on their interactions with diverse groups that they've worked with across the nation, some at the local level, some at the state level, and others nationwide. There's a variety of resources here, websites, guides, tools, videos, and other things there. Some of the resources provide background information or data. Others offer information in the form of templates, tools, or guides. And then some are stories about Farm to ECE programming that really can give you an idea of other folks' experiences and maybe give you some food for thought in your own work. One thing to consider, though, is that this is an ongoing living document that's growing every time the consultants come up with something or interact with someone that they want to include in the document. So you can download it, but at the time you download it, it'll only be as current as that date. So if you find resources there and find yourself wanting to continue to utilize it, I would go back to it periodically to check to see what updates are there in the catalog, and pass it off to Sophia.
So I just wanted to reiterate a couple of our key takeaways from this, which are to start small and grow sustainably over time. Keep it simple and fun, and something that you would be excited to keep doing in the future. And incorporate Farm to ECE strategies into your existing program and curriculum. Next slide. So yeah, we'd love for you all to kind of reflect for a moment and think about a takeaway that you had, or something you learned, or an action step that you want to take home to your program. So feel free to take a second and think about that and share in the chat anything that comes to mind. And Jen, your question about the resources and a follow-up email, we're going to send the recording out to everyone. And in that, we'll also share the links and the resources that we shared in the chat today. Thanks, Jen, for sharing. Be sharing all this good curricula with Farm to ECE partners. Awesome to hear. I know I heard some great ideas on the whiteboard earlier too, which I know I'll be sharing out with our partners, and from Rachel, some really fun ideas. All right, well, oh, looks like we have another one here from Monique. We drove to the community compost pile today and filled up 2 large bins. Congrats. And then brought them home with beets. Oh, so fun. It was a wonderful share for everyone about bugs and worms and beetles and healthy foods and colors. Oh my gosh, how cool. That's so great. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
And a really nice reminder about the role that physical activity plays in this, effort. Kids want to be out there getting active, and if you've got outdoor time, you might as well spend some of it in the garden.
Definitely. All right, Leslie, we're excited. You want to get started? Brianna, yes, actually, that's a great segue to our next slide where we have our contact info. So that's perfect. And yeah, Leslie, I'm excited that you're gonna try out composting. It's a really fun one and a great way to teach science also.
Mhm.
All right. So here is our contact information if you want to reach out to any of us. You also have our websites earlier up in the chat, and we'd love to hear more from you all. And yeah, thank you so much. Next slide. All right, yeah, so we wanted to open it up real quick for questions. If there's any that anyone have for any of us or for Rachel, and then we'll wrap up. And feel free to, if you have a question, just come off mute or share it in the chat. Totally up to you.
While you all are composing any questions that you might have, I have a couple for Rachel. We could start with one. How do you track achieving your goals regarding how you connect between DRDP standards and farm to ECE activities?
We do the DRDP about 3 times per year, and so as we're doing that, we use an app to take photos, and we use the photos to help us to remember what we were doing and to match it up with the DRDP standards. And then when we have the parent conferences, we use that information, and then we also use it for like our daily planning. Like if there's a skill that the kids need to work on, we try to see how we can incorporate that in our farm to ECE. Is it like a fine motor or gross motor, or something that we could do or pull out that we could use? So that's how we track it and try to figure out how we can do that. Yes, thank you, Maddie, for putting what DRDP stands
Oh,
for. My
yes.
apologies. I did. I'm used to all the acronyms and I forget that everyone doesn't know. So yes, it's an assessment profile that we do on the kids to help see where they are and help them to get to kindergarten readiness. That's what the DRDP is for.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure the parents enjoy taking a look at photos too. It's always nice to see what's been going on with your children while they've been in care all day, all week.
Yes, they love it. They think it's awesome.
Monique has her hand raised. Monique, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I don't necessarily have a question. I have more of a comment with regards to this. This looks like an awesome program, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys are putting this information out there. As someone who grew up with gardens and canning and doing everything at home and things of that sort, it's been wonderful. Aeons and aeons ago, I took a wonderful program called Kids Growing Strong that had a really great gardening program as well. I find it really, really upsetting, though, that this is a wonderful resource for us. But on the other hand, the food program won't allow me to use any of my stuff because I can the vegetables, I can the meats, I can this and I can that. They're like, well, you can't use any canned stuff. I'm like, well, then I can't help you.
Hmm.
I would like to be able to utilize all this stuff on the food program because it's all fresh. I can control the spices, I control the salts, I control all of the input into what I can for these kids. And it's 100% healthy, 100% organic. We get fruits, we get vegetables, and everything else, fresh eggs, fresh meat. Can't use any of it because it's not okay per the government's food program. So just so that people understand, if you do things like canning or preserving and things of that sort, you can't use it for the food program for the most part. They won't allow you to use it, which is sad because what you make at home with the wonderful garden is so much more healthy than anything you could buy at a store.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monique, for sharing that. This is Elizabeth Marino. I was in your breakout room too, and I know when you were mentioning this, and we ran out of time to fully respond. But yeah, unfortunately, the issue related to food safety becomes the problem here, and that's why USDA in their regulations do not allow those quote unquote homemade foods. So while I totally understand what you're saying, unfortunately, it's not up to us, we, the state agency. It really is the federal regulations related to that, and it's due to concern about food safety. So we can certainly float your question and concern up the channel, but that's the reason, just so that everyone's kind of aware. That's the reason.
All right, thank you so much. I have another question for Rachel, and then I guess we can conclude if there aren't any others. Rachel, what are some of your favorite books or activities that support your nutrition education, your garden education with the children?
So with these, the Edible Numbers book, the Sophia book, we have a couple of other ones that were in the curriculum that you had mentioned. There's a great list of books that are there. We go to the library and we'll pick up some books. We love the one where it's the stone soup when it's soup time, because then all the kids can bring something and we can make a pot of soup with all the different things that they bring from home. That's really a favorite. And we just kind of rotate different ones. And so it's kind of whatever is in season. We'll try to look up a book about strawberries or the gourds or oranges or apples, whatever is in season. So we'll go to the library and try to find some books that match that.
I love that. And the Edible Numbers book, I had not heard of that until you shared it today. So thank you.
Mhm.
And I don't see any additional questions in the chat, so I think we're going to conclude for the evening. Any other burning questions out there? Okay. Well, hearing none, we want to thank you for your time this evening. We want to thank you for the dialogue and the breakouts, for the questions as we wrap the comments in the chat all along the way, and as we wrapped up for the evening. We want to invite your presence again at future communities of practice, and stay tuned for a link to the recording as well as to the resources as was mentioned earlier. Those will be shared out following the evening. I don't know if any of the other presenters have any closing comments aside from that. All right. Good night. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much. And special thanks to Rachel. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your expertise as always. Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.